Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 11 important articles. So let's cover all the topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement. If you're looking to enroll for our online classes, this would be the perfect opportunity as Unacademy is offering the lowest price ever. You can now avail our subscription at just 16,999, which is basically a flat 60% off. And I'm told that this offer will end within the next 48 hours. So these classes would give you access to the live and recorded lectures along with the study material, the test series and mentorship. So those interested, please check out the details provided in the link in the description box. And on the subscription page, you might see a different fee. In order to avail the discount, you have to enter the code IAS English. So these are the subscription plans available along with the free extension duration. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the first article. On page number 6, we have a topic related to internal security, social justice, and governance. The article is mainly focused on the elimination of Naxalism, how the government of India has almost wiped out the threat of left wing extremism, and what comes later. See, the government of India had set a very ambitious target to achieve a Naxal Mukt Bharat by March 2026. Prime Minister Modi and as well as Union Home Minister Amit Shah had laid down this ambitious goal to bring one of India's biggest internal security challenges to an end by 31st March 2026. And just before the deadline, the Home Minister informed the Parliament that for all practical reasons, India has wiped out the security threat from Naxalism. Because in the last couple of years, India had stepped up the security operations aimed at dismantling the leadership and the financing networks and the logistical networks of the CPI Maoist. The CPI Maoist, which is a designated terrorist outfit in the country, it has lost most of its top leaders, including the General Secretary, Politburo members, and Central Committee members. Many mid and low level cadres have surrendered. Hundreds of hardcore Maoists have been neutralized and eliminated under Operation Black Forest. And thousands of them have surrendered in the last few years. So, with this, India has marked the successful tackling of this threat, which has lasted since 1967, since the Naxalbari movement near Siliguri in West Bengal, when peasants rose up in rebellion against landlords. The movement, which had spread across multiple states, focused on genuine administrative issues and poor governance in the tribal heartland, in rural parts of India, in the forested areas of India. It had been one of India's biggest security challenges. So now that we have largely dealt with the security threat, what comes later? How do you address the genuine root causes that initially triggered this rebellion? For Naxals, for Maoism to thrive, there must have been some genuine issues that were affecting the farmers, the peasants, and the tribal communities, which were exploited by the Maoists. So, the fight against Naxalism is not purely a security based fight. Such a short sighted approach would never help defeat a strong ideology such as Maoism. So, along with the security approach, it's equally important to focus on the administrative approach in order to plug the gaps in governance, to provide for empathetic governance in the Naxal affected areas, to ensure good governance is established, to provide better delivery of public services, and address the grievances of the local population, especially the tribals and farmers and the peasants. So, this remains a topmost priority, and that is exactly what the writers are reminding the central and the state governments. Yes, the credit must be given to the central government and the state governments for working together to eliminate the security threat almost. But now the real work begins, the real challenge begins right now. Just because the security threat has been tackled for now, you can't relax, you can't become complacent, you can't take your attention away from this area. Because even in the past, Naxalism had been weakened in 1980s and 1990s. India had managed to weaken Naxalism quite significantly. The two major Naxal groups, be it the Maoist Communist Center of India, the MCCI, which was primarily operating in the Bihar West Bengal belt, or the PWG, the People's War Group, which was primarily operating in the Andhra Pradesh Odisha belt. Both these outfits, which had thrived in 1970s 80s period, they had been weakened by 1990s and by early 2000s because of security operations, counter-insurgency operations led by the state police in assistance provided by the central forces. By early 2000s, these outfits had been almost wiped out and weakened. But that's when these entities came together and they formed a strategic alliance. They established the CPI Maoist with the remaining Maoist factions and branches that were scattered across the country in the year 2004. And according to the Intelligence Bureau, this was one of the turning points in Naxalism. This was one of the key moments in India's fight against left wing extremism, as the Maoists managed to regroup, re strategize, and they became a serious threat for the next few years, at least for the next decade. In fact, if you study Maoist doctrine, Mao Zedong, he advocated the formation of such strategic alliances. Because see, Maoism believes in a protracted struggle, a people led war that can last decades or even a century if required. So it's rooted in a very strong ideology, and you can't wipe out such movements just by dealing with the security part of the problem. Of course, hardcore elements have to be dealt with through security operations, but at the same time, you need to focus on administrative efficiency. You need to focus on governance related problems, which would have first created the essential base that is needed to attract the local communities towards this ideology. So, to defeat extremist ideologies, you need to tackle not just the security side of the problem, but also the administrative and governance side of the problem. So, post 2004, after the CPI Maoist was formed through the strategic alliance between MCCI and PWG, we saw a major jump in attacks, especially in 2010 at Dantewad in Chhattisgarh. More than 70 CRPF Jawans were martyred in what would be one of the biggest Naxal attacks on Indian security forces. And throughout this decade, many such attacks kept taking place and they had shifted their base towards the Chhattisgarh Odisha belt, centered around the Dandakaranya region of the Eastern Ghats, drawing their support base from the forest dwelling tribal communities and local farming communities. So, Naxalism was branded by then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh as India's biggest internal security threat. Given how quickly the CPI Maoist became a serious challenge, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, when he was addressing the DGP conference, which is organized every year by the Intelligence Bureau, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had stated that left wing extremism is our biggest internal security threat. So, from then onwards, from early 2000s onwards, India started a new approach, adopting a new strategy with new tactics to combat Naxalism. A two pillar approach was launched with enhanced security operations based on real time intelligence, intelligence driven, and tech enabled counter insurgency operations were launched, especially under Operation Green Hunt. Under Operation Green Hunt, which was largely kept as a covert operation, to this day, this phase of the anti Naxal operation is not officially acknowledged by the government of India. Across multiple states, led by the CRPF, and its Cobra Battalion, the Commando Battalion for Resolute Action, which is a special force unit, a elite special force unit that specializes in jungle warfare, in guerrilla warfare. It was deployed in Naxal affected states, primarily in the Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh belt. And in coordination with state police forces, intelligence driven operations were carried out, which dealt a severe blow to the leadership of the Naxals. Parallelly, a number of administrative measures were initiated. Developmental programs were initiated to improve governance and provide for better public services and to restore governance. Because in some areas, Naxals had even challenged the administration, creating parallel administrative setups. They would even call them as so called liberated zones. Even government officials would be worried to enter these Naxal dominated areas. So it took years and years of effort to improve the presence of the government and the administration. That is exactly what the writer is referring to here. In fact, the writer worked as part of the Prime Minister's Fellowship Program under the then UPA government, while the UPA government was implementing a very important scheme in Naxal hit areas known as the Integrated Action Plan. Under the Integrated Action Plan, which was conceptualized by the erstwhile Planning Commission, the focus was on improving local governance with immediate short term results in Naxal affected areas, in left wing extremism affected areas. Under the direct supervision of the Ministry of Home Affairs, this developmental scheme was launched. See, generally, MHA does not deal with developmental programs, right? It's largely responsible for internal security and along with other responsibilities. But to tackle Naxalism, it was essential to address the administrative issues as well. So, based on this plan conceptualized by the then Planning Commission, Integrated Action Plan was launched and implemented by the MHA. Around 60 plus most affected districts were chosen, and they were given a financial outlay of nearly 30 crore rupees per district. The scheme was implemented for 2 years from 2010 to 2012. And each year, the chosen districts would get substantial financing from the center, and the district level committee, led by the DC of the district and the SP and the Indian Forest Service officer at the range level, these three top all India service officials, they would determine as to how these funds would be spent under the direct supervision of the central government. The idea was to bypass the states, to bypass any leakages and corruption, and ensure better delivery of services at the grassroots level. So, this three-member committee that includes the topmost IAS, IPS, and Indian Forest Service officer at the district level, they would work with the local panchayat officials and the local leaders to decide how this money would be spent to achieve immediate and quick results, like improving road, providing for better school infrastructure, providing water supply. So, such high impact projects were taken up. The writer refers to one such initiative in the West Medipur region of West Bengal, where young girls used to play hockey in open fields with no proper equipment, and how, under the integrated action plan, a proper hockey turf and a football stadium was set up. And today, these sports facilities have produced some of India's finest athletes. Some of the women players are today in our national team, including the captain of the Indian women's hockey team, um, who's a product of the same infrastructure that was created under the Integrated Action Plan. So, this fight against Naxalism has been a very long journey. Along with enhanced security operations, the focus on administrative measures has been equally important. And this is a basic lesson in conflict resolution and conflict management. Now, when you look at what the Modi government has done in the last decade, it is honestly remarkable. Under the Modi government, these efforts were stepped up. India doubled down on these efforts with more enhanced security operations, intelligence driven operations to take out the top leadership if they're not willing to surrender. See, India is always a very reasonable state that follows rule of law. The central and state governments ensured that a surrender and rehabilitation policy was always in place. India has always shown the willingness to even engage in talks with left wing extremists. But those who would refuse to surrender, those who would not lay down their arms, those who would refuse to come back into the mainstream, and those who continue to engage in violence against our security forces, they would become legitimate security targets. So the center has spent a lot of money to help state police forces to modernize their uh, their arsenal, their training, especially the Naxal affected states. They received special funding under the SRE, the Special Expenditure Program, that promoted police modernization at the state level, where the Naxal affected states were encouraged to procure better communication tools, better transportation mechanisms, and as well as weapons, and also provide better training for their anti Naxal forces. Then, apart from this, the Modi government adopted a national action plan in 2015. A national action plan was adopted to fight Naxalism that focused not just on security operations but equally prioritized administrative measures, from fortifying the local police stations to bringing in the Indian Air Force to provide airlift capabilities, with IB and NTRO generating technical and human intelligence. India stepped up the fight against Naxalism, and the results are there for everyone to see. In 2017, the Modi government even brought out the Samadhan Doctrine, under which India adopted a holistic approach to combat Naxalism. India went after the terror financing networks, the linkages with organized criminal entities, including drug production and drug trafficking, which was acting as a financing route for Naxals. India cracked down on the extortion rackets run by the Naxals. India managed to employ better surveillance, high technology, from drones to surveillance planes to satellite imagery. And they all played a decisive role in this final battle. So now the real work begins, where India must prioritize the implementation of these developmental programs in Naxal affected areas. The Modi government should be given the entire credit for some of the specific programs that are implemented in this region today. The Aspirational Districts program has great potential to help transform these backward districts which have been left behind as far as India's growth story is concerned. There are ground level issues which have never been addressed for decades, from large public projects which have displaced the local communities to rampant corruption in government schemes, which has affected the local population, or the forced displacement of forest dwelling and tribal communities. These issues can be resolved one by one, and the implementation of these specific schemes that you see here will be critical to achieve that reconciliation with the local population. The PM Janman scheme, Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan, which prioritizes tribal rights, focuses on improving the livelihood and standard of living for forest dwelling and tribal communities. Dharti Aba Janjatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, that provides for more inclusive development, focuses on saturation with regard to development initiatives at the grassroots. Then we also have the Adi Karma Yogi Abhiyan, focusing on capacity building, skill development, vocational training, which can create livelihood and job opportunities. There should be better implementation of the Forest Rights Act to secure tribal rights and the forest rights of the forest dwelling communities, their right to collect minor forest produce on which their livelihood depends, recognizing their title rights to reside in forest areas, which they have done from centuries, recognizing their community rights to conserve the local forests. So these basic rights will have to be better enforced and better delivered. Then local governance through panchayat level administration has to be improved and stepped up. Under the fifth schedule, the scheduled areas notified by the president, where the governor of the respective state with the tribal advisory council, they get special powers to administer the tribal areas, to look after the development and welfare of these regions. This would be of critical importance to deliver better governance in these areas. Under Article 275, Clause 1, under which grants in aid is provided to states, the center can provide for additional grants, including tribal subplan grants, to give more financial flexibility to these Naxal affected states so that they can provide for better investments in the Naxal prone areas. The Finance Commission as well could work with the central government to channel more investments into this region by providing for better devolution of funds. So, providing for all round improvement in governance and development is critical in the Naxal heartland. Now, though the security threat has largely been dealt with, the ideology, as I said, will not be so easily defeated. Maoism is designed to be a protracted movement. It is designed to take a step back and wait and watch and regroup and revive the movement later on. And we have seen this happen in the past. So, to address the genuine root issues which are present, we need to ensure some of the problems, administrative side problems, are addressed immediately. So, the next few years, the policy focus should remain in the Naxal areas. The central and state governments and the concerned ministries, departments, and agencies should not get complacent. We need to keep heightened surveillance. At the same time, we need to push for better governance and ensure that the rights of the local communities is protected at any cost. So this is the key lesson that we take away from this article. And the topic can be very, very important for GS paper 2 and GS paper 3. So please take down this mains question and based on what we have discussed, try to practice your answer writing. Now let's move to the next topic. On page 6, there's a column written by Arindam Goswami and Ashwin Prasad. They are examining the recent FTAs and the trade deals that India has signed, and they are highlighting the limitations of these trade agreements. See, earlier this year, India signed the mother of all trade deals with the European Union. The India EU FTA was signed, and very soon it is likely to take effect. Apart from that, India US announced a trade deal which is yet to be officially signed. But both India US made the official announcement that they have finalized a trade deal to resolve some of the differences in their trade partnership. Now, these two mega trade deals holds out a lot of promise as claimed by the government of India and the other parties as well. But however, the writers have a different take on this. They have a different approach when it comes to India's trade engagement. Their argument is that signing such trade deals and FTAs with major powers may not lead anywhere as far as India is concerned. It may not give us the desired benefits that we are looking for. Because, see, today's world order has completely changed. Today, we are living in a world where international rules are largely discarded. Major powers, they are hardly bothered about respecting international rules. See, one reason why India was able to grow at a rapid pace in the last 3 decades was because a rules based order existed. Multilateral institutions, though they are flawed, they were functioning, especially platforms like WTO. It would always ensure that unfair trade could be tackled through such platforms. So, a developing nation like India got preferential treatment. This opened up many markets to India. It gave us preferential trade access to several territories and jurisdictions. It allowed India to use the low tariff regime in many developed markets. And that was critical for increasing India's exports, for India to procure key intermediaries and raw materials. So, WTO norms and the system of international rules has largely benefited the global south over the past 2.5 to 3 decades. But today, we are seeing a world where these rules and these systems are no longer respected. So, we are looking at two parallel systems dominated by two major powers, US and China. And this is where India faces a very difficult choice. See, to be realistic in a globalized economy, no country can be 100% self reliant. It's impossible. No country can produce everything that it wants. That's where globalization comes into picture because it helps you access goods, materials that can be produced at a much cheaper rate in some other country. And in a way, it's a win win situation for everyone. As long as the trade is balanced, as long as everyone has equal access, and as long as unfair trade practices are penalized, then a globalized economy benefits everyone. It helps you to take the advantage of low cost production in other jurisdictions, source raw materials, inputs, and intermediaries from other places, and build self reliance in some critical and strategic sectors. So, India has largely benefited from this model. But however, this has created a dependency of sorts for India, and today major powers like US, China are weaponizing the geo-economic advantage that they have. Look at how China has weaponized its control over critical minerals and critical intermediaries, not just against India, but against almost the entire world. China is known to weaponize the trade advantage it has. China runs a huge trade surplus against most of its trading partners. It has a monopolistic control over the supply chains of critical minerals. It maintains a dominating position in most sectors, including in key technologies, from telecom to artificial intelligence to chips to pharmaceuticals. One reason why India could emerge as the pharmacy of the world by producing the largest volume of generic drugs and vaccines is because we could easily procure the intermediaries, the APIs, the active pharmaceutical ingredients from China. Here we have a near 60% dependency. China supplies nearly 60% of the APIs used by our pharma industry. But especially after the Galwan River Valley clashes and the Ladakh military standoff, China has weaponized the trade advantage and it has selectively placed restrictions on the supply of certain critical commodities. And as the US China trade war has grown, China has placed more restrictions on the supply chains related to critical minerals and key technologies. The same challenges are being faced with US under Donald Trump. Though India was largely under the assumption that US can be a reliable trusted partner, Trump has changed this entirely in one go. When Trump targeted India over India's purchase of Russian oil and levied 50% tariffs on India, this has almost decimated India's exports and it has exposed the vulnerabilities that we face with major powers. So, no matter what deals you sign with developed nations and dominating powers like China, India would always be the weaker party over here. See, for long we have maintained this policy of neutrality or multi alignment, where we don't get too close to anyone. At the same time, we maintain a certain distance from everyone. This has been our standard position from non alignment to multi alignment. So the writer says this approach is no longer feasible. Pushing for FTAs and bilateral trade deals, though it might look lucrative on the face of it, the thing is, when you're signing them with large powers, with developed nations, they will always retain the advantage. They could always weaponize the trade advantage that they have to punish countries like India. And this is a crippling strategic vulnerability. So that is why the writers have a different suggestion. They have an alternate solution for this. They are suggesting that India should stop chasing bilateral FTAs and bilateral trade deals. Instead, their suggestion is for India to work with similar powers and middle powers in specific sectors. We should strike sector specific deals where India can also hold an equally dominating position and work with like minded countries. See, writers are not referring to groups like BRICS. BRICS also has exposed its own limitations, given how China is trying to dominate BRICS and the presence of several countries which have problematic ties with the West, countries like Iran, for example, and Russia as well, right? That creates a new layer of complexity for India. So BRICS may not be the right platform as well. What writers are suggesting is that India should consider similarly placed powers in some key sectors. Now, take for example, India has become a leading power with regard to DPI, digital public infrastructure. India's digital payment ecosystem under UPI and the national identification system, Aadhaar, and how they are linked with mobile connections, creating a seamless digital public infrastructure for delivering public services. Now, this can be a key export of India. Many countries are very eager to replicate and copy the Indian model. We are pushing it through our diplomacy as well. So, we can partner with African countries and other like minded Asian countries to focus on sectors like DPI. Another important sector can be artificial intelligence, space technology, semiconductor chips. Selective countries need to be chosen. For example, a country like France, when it comes to semiconductor fabrication, it's not at the same level as, let's say, US or let's say China. But France is indeed a key player. It does have the technology. UAE has the capital. Japan is one of the leading chip producers in the world. But however, it remains a middle power, which is subjected to the whims and fancies of major powers like China and US. So probably India could end up creating a coalition with France, UAE, and Japan just for semiconductor chip industry. India has the talent, India has the manpower, India has the markets. India wants to emerge as a semiconductor hub, and we can do that by working with France, UAE, and Japan. And maybe a similar model for artificial intelligence, where India can work with a select list of similarly placed powers and middle powers. So instead of striking these grand FTAs and big bilateral trade deals with all the major powers, India will eventually be pulled on either side. Previously, we could rely on Russia. We would see Russia as a counterweight to Western dominance. Now, that is no longer the case, right? Russia itself has become dependent on China. So for India, which is getting trapped between the West and China, the alternative is to work with similarly placed powers and middle powers to create sector specific arrangements. Maybe for pharma, we can have one set of cooperation with a specific set of countries. For artificial intelligence, quantum computing, one sector based cooperation with a select list of countries. So, sort of a mini lateral trade arrangement, but with few similarly placed powers where India can be a equal partner. Now, when you look at India US trade deal or India EU FTA, India can never be a equal partner. So, when we work with middle powers in sectors where India also has a dominating position or at least a respectable position, there India can command the equal status and act as an equal partner, drawing equal benefits while contributing to such an alliance. So that is what the writers are recommending, that we should look beyond trade deals, we should look beyond FTAs and stop focusing just on major powers. Instead, we should focus on middle powers and similarly placed countries and work out sector specific cooperation. So, based on what we have discussed, take up this practice question and please use it for your answer writing practice. Now, moving on, we have an editorial on page number 6 that analyzes India's relations with South Korea. See, recently, South Korea's president was on a bilateral visit to India where important deals were signed. So, as a result, this editorial will help us understand the entire depth and spectrum of India's relations with the Republic of South Korea, or ROK. So, let's quickly take a look at India's ties with South Korea. So, first, let's talk about the historical, cultural, and soft power relations that we share. See, India South Korea share a deep rooted civilizational relationship that goes back several centuries. It's even widely believed that Princess and later Queen Suri Ratna, who's widely revered in South Korean history, is believed to be an Indian princess. According to the South Korean legend, Suri Ratna traveled from a place that's referred to in the South Korean mythology and legend as Ayut. And this some historians believe to be Ayodhya in India. In fact, this belief is so strong that there is a memorial that was recently constructed in Ayodhya, and there is a similar memorial in South Korea as well. But however, please understand that this has never been conclusively proven, because there are many historians who don't agree with this assessment. They believe this document, this scripture in South Korea, which mentions about this so called Indian princess, to be a largely fictional account of a Buddhist monk. The whole scripture is a very exaggerated account. So there is no other corresponding evidence, archaeological or literary or other historical sources, which confirm this theory. So this is largely believed to be a legend, a sort of a myth. It's not historical fact, right? Though some believe to be it to be a historical fact that this legendary queen of South Korea was a Indian princess from Ayodhya, there is that angle that exists. Though it has not been established or proven, a large number of people do believe this. But you can't deny the ancient Hindu Buddhist linkages that bind India and South Korea, right? Buddhism, which flowed out from India across Southeast and East Asia, it has left a lasting imprint in South Korea as well. And several South Korean pilgrims do visit India for Buddhist pilgrimage. So there is a deep rooted historical cultural connection. And apart from that, today, South Korea is known to be one of those countries which has really capitalized on its soft cultural pull, be it Korean pop, especially in India. Korean bands such as BTS, Blackpink are extremely popular, right? They have a huge following base in India. Or K dramas, they have become globally popular, including in India. Korean food has its own fan base across the world as well as in India. Look at the recent food chains and restaurants that are serving South Korean cuisine. And Korean skincare, cosmetics, including brands like Beauty of Ocean, they have wide popularity in India and huge demand in India. Then Korean brands, Korean conglomerates, consumer brands, they are household names in our country. Now you tell me who hasn't heard of LG, Samsung, or Daewoo, which went bankrupt, but you still have other entities of Daewoo which are still functioning, right? Then popular car manufacturers like Hyundai, Kia Motors, the list goes on. Many of them have huge manufacturing facilities in India, from LG to Hyundai, and they are key manufacturers and investors of FDI. So there is that very, very close linkage that exists between both sides, be it culturally, be it economically, right? And the Korean government has created that soft power image, investing heavily in pushing its cultural symbols from food to its various products. And that's what creates that common linkage today. But the point is, India and South Korea have plenty of opportunities. So during the visit of the South Korean president, the two sides have agreed to elevate the relationship to the strategic partnership level, and they want to revive the SEPA talks, which had been stalled. India, South Korea, by the way, are negotiating a free trade agreement, a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. Right now, our bilateral trade is just around $27 billion. I mean, this is way below potential. Please understand, India, South Korea are amongst the top 15 global economies in terms of their GDP size. So their bilateral trade can't be just $27 billion. So they have proposed a roadmap to nearly double the trade volume by the end of the decade to $50 billion by 2030. They're reviving the SEPA talks, elevating the strategic partnership, because today, India, South Korea, we have common interests, we have common concerns. The Indo Pacific, which has become a heated battleground between US, China, and other Southeast and East Asian powers. It is a contested region because of the South China Sea and East China Sea disputes. And India, South Korea share similar concerns about Chinese aggression and China's military expansion that's happening in the region. We even enjoy very close defense partnership, by the way. See, South Korea is a major power when it comes to defense manufacturing, production of semiconductor chips. In fact, South Korea is part of the Fab 4 or the Chip 4 alliance that includes Japan, US, and Taiwan. South Korea is also a global leader in shipbuilding industry, in logistics. That is something India would like to learn from South Korea. South Korea has a massive industrial base, a technological base, and India has procured this advanced artillery system for the Indian Army. It's the K9 Thunder, the South Korean version developed by Hong Aerospace. It has been procured through a joint contract with L&T, an Indian company, Larsen and Toubro, which is into defense manufacturing as well. And the Indian version of K9, called K9 Vajra, has been produced with nearly 50% indigenous content, and at least 200 of these artillery units have already been inducted into the Indian Army. Now, what is unique about K9 Vajra is that it's a self-propelled artillery gun, a self-propelled howitzer that can fire 155 caliber shells. And it comes with specialized heating gear and equipment, which means it's very light and it is a self-contained unit. It can be easily deployed in high altitude regions in very cold terrain where temperatures can drop to zero or sub-zero temperatures. So the K9 has great utility for Indian Army, especially in the Himalayan belt, against China and even against Pakistan. In the sectors of Ladakh and Himachal Uttarakhand sector with China, the K9 artillery units can be easily deployed. They can even be airlifted. So now India is ordering more units of K9. We are looking to procure 200 more such units with 70% indigenous content, which will be domestically produced by L&T. So the defense partnership is growing. So during the visit, the new deal has been announced. So India would become one of the largest operators of the K9. Eventually, we'll have a total of 400 artillery guns. So you can see how the relationship is really expanding and how common opportunities are present. Now, also please understand, energy security is a common concern for both India and South Korea. Why? Because just like India, South Korea has a critical dependency on energy imports. Though South Korea is a technological leader and an advanced economy and an industrial economy, nearly 90% of its fossil fuels are imported, especially from West Asia. So the Iran war and the closure of Hormuz has dealt a severe blow to the South Korean economy, just like India has been hit. So achieving energy security, focusing on clean renewable energy, focusing on electric mobility and transportation, these are common areas of interest. So India, South Korea are natural partners. Now, if you look at the diaspora as well, right now, the relationship has much more potential. You can say it's underutilized. You hardly have around 15,000 Indian expatriates in South Korea, which is way below the potential. There are thousands of Indian students and workers, but the potential is much more than this. There are just around 12,000 South Korean residents in India, which is again way below the potential, right? So the diaspora relations, the people to people relations can be really improved. There's a lot of opportunity that lies ahead for this. But at the same time, you should also be aware of some concerns with regard to South Korea, something that bothers India. See, there is one major problem for Indians or South Asians in general. South Korea is one of the most racist societies that you can find in the world. South Koreans are obsessed with their skin color, with how they maintain themselves. And this results in racism based on one's ethnicity and skin color. They often discriminate heavily on people of South Asian origin, not just Indians in general. Anyone with a brown skin is often discriminated, facing excessive racism in the country. This remains a persistent problem and also explains the lower number of Indians that you find in South Korea. Usually, when we have such good economic ties and close political relations, the Indian community should have been much, much larger in size. One reason why the Indian presence is less is because of excessive racism in the country. Even the tourist flow is quite limited between both sides. And partially, this has to do with the racism that Indian tourists often face in South Korea. Then there is another problem. South Korea is one of the most unequal societies. Though it's an advanced economy, there is a massive inequality that you find in their society. There are ultra rich and the poor workers, and in between, the pay gap is massive. So, this again creates a sort of a inconsistency for a country like India to engage with South Korea. And also, don't forget, South Korea has an authoritarian past. For decades, it has been ruled by military dictatorships from 1961 to 1988. And recently, in 2024, the former president declared martial rule, tried deploying military rule again, but he was overruled and overthrown, thankfully. So, the inconsistencies with regard to democracy, with regard to respect for constitutional rights, they remain challenges in this relationship, right? And South Korea also has a dependency on China, just like India. So there are concerns, the challenges that are present, but there are great opportunities as well. So this is what you need to learn about India's special ties with South Korea. Now let's quickly move on, just a few more articles and we can wrap up the session for today. We have few updates from the Iran war. Iran has targeted few vessels near Hormuz again. Iran reportedly has attacked a couple of cargo ships that were trying to exit the Hormuz Strait. One of them was an Israeli flagged and Israeli linked ship. And this has heightened the concerns for freedom of navigation. See, this issue will not get resolved until the United States lifts its blockade of Hormuz. So it's become like a zero sum game where Iran is refusing to lift the blockade. Though it had announced a complete opening of the blockade last week, it made a U-turn and it brought back the restrictions. It has even targeted and attacked ships. Because Iran is saying, unless and until US lifts the blockade, because US has been blockading Iranian ships. US has imposed a naval blockade on Iranian ports in order to cripple the Iranian economy. Because Iran has still continued to sell oil, especially to China, right? So US is trying to blockade this, and Iran wants all such hostile action to cease. Only then Iran would agree to come to the negotiating table. Now this comes as a big embarrassment for Donald Trump. See, Trump might claim all the victories he wants on social media, right? But eventually, the ground reality is that both US and Israel have realized that they are incapable of clearing Hormuz on their own. That is Iran's biggest leverage. At the same time, Iran is also being unreasonable. Iran has to commit to some concessions on its nuclear program, right? It has to give guarantees on its nuclear program, maybe hand over its nuclear stockpile. But the second round of talks, which was slated to be held in Pakistan, has not taken place. And primarily, Trump has to be blamed for this because of his maximalist demands, his ridiculous posts on social media, right? His open threats to wipe out entire civilization of Iran. It has served no purpose. And as they say, Trump always chickens out. Eventually, when he realizes that his empty threats will not be realized, he will take a back step. So, after threatening Iran for multiple weeks, now he has agreed to extend the ceasefire unconditionally for a prolonged period unless and until Iran comes with a proposal. Now he's acknowledging that there is no proper Iranian leadership. So they need some time to come out with a unified proposal. But until now, they were claiming that they have decimated the Iranian leadership, wiped out the regime itself. So Trump is known to make these U-turns again and again. So though US was ready to send its delegates for the Islamabad talks, Iran put its foot down. Iran said that we are not going to participate in the second round if US continues to blockade Hormuz. Now, when you look at what US has done and said, it makes it very clear that who has the upper hand, right? Though Iran has suffered significant damage in terms of the military infrastructure and the civilian infrastructure, it does maintain the strategic upper hand and controls the narrative, right? Israel has been forced to agree to a ceasefire in Lebanon, and now US has been forced to take a back step and extend the ceasefire indefinitely. So Iran, at the same time, will now have to agree to lift the blockade on Hormuz and show concessions on the nuclear program. But for that, US has to lift the blockade on Hormuz. These are the steps that need to follow, or else the chaos would continue. The war is unlikely to end, and we don't want everlasting wars in the region. Nobody wants another everlasting war, that too in a region as critical as West Asia, because the US is known to start and get involved in such everlasting conflicts. Right? We have seen this from Vietnam to Afghanistan to West Asia and Africa. So if this conflict has to end through talks and negotiations, the only way it can happen is for US to take a back step from its maximalist position. The only way it can happen is if Israel shows restraint. Israel has to be pulled back. Israel has been acting as a major aggressor for at least 3 years. It needs to be pulled back, and only the US can do that. And Iran as well should stop behaving as an irresponsible rogue state, and it should agree to commitments on its nuclear program. See, nobody in the world wants a nuclear Iran, right? Not even India. Iran will have to make some guarantees. So this deal is essential, but it has to begin with US showing the first concession by lifting the blockade of Hormuz, and in return, Iran is showing the willingness to lift the blockade. Right? Initially, Iran had announced a complete opening, and it reversed the announcement only after US refused to lift the blockade. So this is where the start has to be made, and both sides have to come out with reasonable demands and reasonable proposals. But in the meanwhile, let's look at India's LPG scenario, LPG situation. Since LPG vessels have not been able to really get out of Hormuz, a few have managed to make the exit, and they have brought some LPG supplies to India and Sri Lanka. At Trincomalee, some vessels have dumped the LPG on India's west coast from Mangaluru to Mumbai. Some LPG supplies have been dumped. But this alone is not enough to take care of India's demands for the coming months. So India has been quickly diversifying its LPG supplies. Because see, the cargo vessels right now, they can't go back to Hormuz. Given the situation that exists, the volatility and the lack of a deal, uh, this route via Persian Gulf is not viable for India. That's why India has diversified primarily towards the United States. The only concern here is that the journey from US to India, the to and fro journey, takes nearly 45 to 60 days. So we've already started sending out these cargo vessels, or we have contracted foreign vessels, primarily from Texas. From Texas, gas is being shipped to Indian ports in Vishakhapatnam, Mangaluru, and Ennore. And they are also taking the much longer route. The Suez Canal route would have been much shorter, but the Suez Canal route through Red Sea remains vulnerable because the Houthis can attack, and the war risk premium for insurance is very high. So the shipping industry is not taking any chances, and they are basically going around the Cape of Good Hope. They are circumnavigating around Africa, taking many more days, increasing the cost of transportation, and this has a spillover effect on the cost of LPG that we are importing. So right now, India is barely able to ensure the supplies are in line as per the domestic demand. But if this crisis continues as it is, even after we diversify and buy more gas from US and other partners, we will continue to face the challenge. Right? The prices would be much higher because of the longer duration, the longer route, and the heightened cost of transportation would spill over. So that's why it's essential for India to try and nudge these powers to agree to a deal as soon as possible. Coming to the next topic, China has praised a few countries in the Indian Ocean, Africa region. Because, see, something interesting happened the other day. The president of Taiwan was supposed to be on an official visit to a very small African country called Eswatini. Some of you may not have heard of it. It's a very small landlocked nation in southern Africa. It's almost entirely surrounded by South Africa, and it also shares a very small border with Mozambique. So Eswatini is one of the 12 countries in the world which has officially recognized Taiwan, which has official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Now, those of you who are not aware as to what is the background here, see, China, mainland China, that's ruled by the Communist Party of China, officially the People's Republic of China, claims to have sovereignty over Taiwan as well. Taiwan was essentially ruled by the Kuomintang Party as the Republic of China following the Chinese Civil War in 1949, when the communists under Mao Zedong defeated the Kuomintangs, the nationalists KMT. The Kuomintang were driven out into Taiwan under its leader Chiang Kai-shek. Since then, Taiwan has been a self-ruled territory, a self-ruled island across the Taiwan Strait. But China has always sworn to take back Taiwan through force, and it claims full sovereignty over Taiwan. So essentially, at one point, there were two Chinese territories and two Chinese governments, with PRC ruling over mainland China and ROC under the Kuomintangs ruling over Taiwan. So there were two Chinese territories and two Chinese governments. So the PRC under the Communist Party of China came out with the One China policy and the One China principle. Now, according to this One China policy, the CPC or the Communist Party of China believes that there is only one Chinese government and there is only one Chinese territory. So China reiterates its sovereignty through the One China policy, stating that all the territory that China claims, that includes even Tibet, Hong Kong, and as well as Xinjiang, right, including Taiwan, is all claimed as part of Chinese territory with one Chinese legitimate government, which is the PRC under the Communist Party. And it expects all the other partners to follow the One China principle, meaning they should only recognize PRC and maintain relations with PRC, and they should not recognize the Republic of China. Today, most countries in the world, including India, have accepted the One China principle. Almost every country, except for 12 countries. All major powers in the world have accepted One China principle, meaning they do not have official ties with Taiwan. Even India does not have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. We only have limited economic and cultural engagement, but we don't have official diplomatic ties and we don't recognize Taiwan as a country. This is China's precondition. PRC's precondition is that if you want good relations with us, you should not recognize Taiwan, you should not have relations with them. That is the One China principle. Now, there are 12 countries, as I said. Few of them are small countries in the Pacific. Some of them are in the Caribbean, in Central America as well. And Eswatini from Africa is one of them, which has gone against the PRC, and they have recognized Taiwan and they have official ties with Taiwan. Now, can you find out which are these 12 countries? Which are these 12 countries that have recognized Taiwan and have relations with Taiwan? Okay, now coming back to this development, Taiwan's president, as he's reaching out to the global community to reassert Taiwan's sovereignty claims, he was supposed to visit Eswatini, which is one of the few countries that recognizes them. But during the course of the journey, the flight would pass over the airspace of many other nations in the Indian Ocean Africa region. And China exerted economic and diplomatic pressure on three countries in particular, which is of concern for India as well: Seychelles, Mauritius, and as well as Madagascar. These three critical countries in the Indian Ocean region, they have denied permission for the aircraft. By the way, all the three countries have great relations with India as well. Right? India sees itself as the predominant power in the Indian Ocean, with close strategic defense relations with Seychelles, Mauritius, and Madagascar. But China managed to exert pressure on three of them and convince them to deny permission for the flight carrying the leader of Taiwan. So, as a result, the whole visit had to be cancelled. So, China has praised these countries, it has appreciated these African and Indian Ocean countries, and it again highlights the kind of influence and pressure tactics that China can resort to. And also understand Seychelles, Mauritius, and Madagascar, they've all accepted one China principle, meaning they don't recognize ties with Taiwan, they don't recognize Taiwan's leadership. Right? Same goes for India. Even India has accepted this. That's why India would never invite Taiwan's leader. No European country would ever invite Taiwan's leader. Same with big powers like Australia. So this again shows how China reiterates and asserts its one China policy and one China principle. Now, coming to the prelim section, we have a few small articles. Let's take a quick look. On the front page, we have an article related to online gaming and the regulation of online gaming and esports in India. So let's take a quick look at this. So the Parliament last year enacted the Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Act 2025. This seeks to ban real money games where real money is used to bet and wager, especially for online esports, fantasy leagues through virtual cricket or football matches, for example, or where betting and real money can be used for any such online gaming uh, products. They have been completely banned under the act, and the whole online gaming industry has been brought under the strict regulation of this new legislation. So the Parliament had delegated the rule making authority to the concerned ministry, the nodal ministry, which is the Ministry of Electronics and IT. So this is what we call as subordinate legislation. When the Parliament passes the broad act and basically delegates the role of defining the finer aspects of the law and notifying the rules to the concerned ministries. So that is called subordinate legislation. So the Ministry of Electronics and IT had been given the task to notify the specific rules and the regulatory norms, and now it has brought them out. So according to the new norms, registration is mandatory for esports. Then there is a regulatory body being set up, the Online Gaming Authority of India. It will function as an attached office within the Ministry of Electronics and IT. It would be a complete digital office. So it will run as an attached office within the METI ministry, and it also has representatives from related ministries, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Law, and it will be a digital office that will regulate the online gaming industry. So there are specific registration norms that have been specified. So for esports, it is mandatory to register wherever real money betting is involved, real money exchange is involved. Those games are completely banned and prohibited. Those betting platforms which bet on Indian elections or sports and events in India, they are also completely banned and prohibited. But any other legitimate online gaming platform or product is allowed. Even social media games will be allowed, but they'll be regulated. And from time to time, the norms will be stipulated by the Online Gaming Authority of India. But one challenge that India is facing with regard to these banned games is you can still access them through VPNs, through virtual private networks. Right now, India is trying to work out a regulation as to how to regulate and restrict VPN access. The Ministry of Electronics and IT is working on this proposal. Next, the Mahanadi Water Disputes Tribunal has given one last chance to Odisha and Chhattisgarh to mutually settle the interstate river dispute between them. See, the Mahanadi River is one of the key rivers in peninsular India, right? It flows for more than 800 kilometers. It takes birth at the Amarkantak Hills in the Bastar Plateau, right, which is a part of the uh, Chota Nagpur, Amarkantak plateau and ranges, and it flows into Odisha. But the challenge here is that this shared river is a key lifeline for both the states, right? And eventually it drains into Bay of Bengal. But after Chhattisgarh became a separate state, after it was carved out as a separate state, more than 500 water management projects have been taken up. Hundreds of aqueducts, barrages, small dams, micro dams have been built, which has allegedly affected water flow into Odisha, which is the lower riparian state, because Chhattisgarh is the upper riparian state. So this river dispute was essentially brought to a dispute settlement through the tribunal process as outlined under the Constitution of India. Now I'll give you one more exercise. Can you find out which constitutional provision, which article provides for interstate water dispute tribunals? Find out this article in the Indian Constitution. So, after hearing the arguments of both the sides, the Mahanadi Water Dispute Tribunal is all set to pass its final award. But before it can deliver the final award, it's giving one chance for a mutual settlement. The states can mutually negotiate and work out a water sharing arrangement. So, this is the last chance that they have been given. If they fail to achieve a mutual settlement, then the tribunal is going to pass its final award by next week. The next article, India is opening up more immigration checkposts for e-visa access, for electronic visa. See, India has around 114 immigration checkposts. It includes some of your airports, seaports, land and rail-based border crossing points. These are your ports of entry where foreign nationals can enter India. But of course, they all need a valid visa from India, except for Nepali citizens and to some extent Bhutanese citizens. Almost everyone else needs a visa. Either it could be visa on arrival, or it could be a e-visa or a regular visa. See, generally, most people confuse e-visa with visa on arrival. It's not the same. Both are different. Visa on arrival is basically you land at the port of entry and then you apply for a visa. This is a special privileged treatment given only to some close countries. E-visa is where you obtain an electronic visa through online application. You don't have to visit the embassy or the consulate, which is a much difficult process. So e-visa facility is again given to few select countries only. Right now, India has given e-visa facility for nearly 207 countries and territories, except for China, Pakistan, Yemen, and even for Iran. We don't provide e-visa for them. Apart from that, almost every other country is eligible. So right now we have 37 seaports, which are immigration checkposts. Basically, these are ports of entry for foreign nationals. And India is opening up more seaports in Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra Pradesh, which could facilitate the movement of foreign nationals through the sea route. This is primarily helpful for businessmen, for students, for athletes, for seafarers and mariners, etc. So India has designated these port facilities such as Alang, Porbandar, etc. in Gujarat, Kakinada in Andhra Pradesh, Kadlor and Ennore and Nagapattinam in Tamil Nadu. So these ports have been opened up, even Paradeep and Dhamra in Odisha. Around 14 seaports have been opened up for e-visa facility where foreign nationals with e-visas can easily enter India. So this is a topic related to immigration. Next, the ILO has published a very concerning report, the International Labour Organization. It has published the psychological working environment report. Please make a note of this. Please write it down. Very important for your prelims. The psychological working environment report published by ILO. It mainly focuses on the stress levels that workers are facing at workplace, and it assesses the health impact, the mental health impact, the physiological health impact because of excessive work, abusive workplaces is captured through this report of International Labour Organization. Now, what is really shocking, according to the report, is that more than 8,40,000 lives are being lost every year because of toxic workplaces. That's a very shocking assessment brought out through this report. Because when you face a stressful work environment, for example, where there is no work life balance, where you're expected to work 48 hours and above per week, where you're expected to work 10 to 12 hours per day. So this creates a big imbalance with no time for personal space, with no focus on personal health and family and relaxation and recreation. So this increases mental stress, fatigue, which results in cardiovascular diseases, which can lead to non-communicable lifestyle-related diseases from type 2 diabetes to hypertension, which could result eventually in metabolic syndrome that could even lead to the death of the worker. Plus, there are workplaces where workers might be abused and harassed mentally or physically. So all these stress factors has been captured in this report. According to the report, more than 35% of workers around the world are made to work for more than 48 hours per week. Basically, you have mini Narayan Murtis across the world as managers, pushing ordinary workers to work more and affecting their mental health, putting severe stress on their cardiovascular functions and affecting their work life balance. Nearly 23% of workers globally have even faced some form of violence or physical harassment at workplace. These are alarming reports based on what ILO has assessed. Physiological violence has been recorded at 18%. So this shows the level of toxic work that employees across the world are forced to endure. And this directly translates into economic loss eventually. According to this report, the global GDP shrinks by nearly 1.37% because of toxic workplaces, that is resulting in the death of 8.4 lakh people annually. The next article, there is a defense exercise in the news called DIVEX 2026. This is a bilateral diving exercise between India and Sri Lanka. It's a naval exercise between Indian Navy and Sri Lankan Navy that will mainly focus on underwater diving operations. So for this exercise, INS Nirikshak has been deployed by India, which is a specialist vessel of the Indian Navy that that is used for diving operations, for submarine rescue operations, etc. So India is training the Sri Lankan Navy in these underwater operations to carry out deep diving, which is primarily used in submarine rescue operations, and it also serves a key strategic military purpose as well. It will build interoperability between Indian Navy and Sri Lankan Navy. Now, coming to the last article for today, Thailand has carried out a ritual and a Buddhist ceremony at a disputed temple, at a controversial temple site, which has attracted criticism from the neighboring country of Cambodia. So, this temple in news is not what you expect. It's not the Priya Vihar temple that all of you are aware of. This article is referring to a nearby temple called Prasat Thakrabe, or also known as Kwai. See, all of you must be familiar with the Priya Vihar temple, right, which is at the source of the dispute and conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. The Priya Vihar temple over here in the Dangrek mountain ranges, it has been a source of dispute for many decades, and the International Court of Justice has awarded the temple to Cambodia. But Thailand also claims it. And by the way, the Priya Vihar temple that goes back to the Khmer regime is a Hindu Buddhist temple dedicated to Lord Shiva, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So the Priya Vihar temple has been at the very center of the conflict that we saw last year between Thailand and Cambodia. Now, along the same border, there are other disputed temples as well, which is also part of the conflict. Now, you can see Prasat Takwai and the other temples, the Hindu Buddhist temples, which are also on the same border that are disputed between both sides. So, this particular temple that you see in the image, Thakwai temple, it is a 11th century monument. It goes back to the Khmer regime, which at that point was a Hindu and later turned into a Buddhist empire. So the temple built by Suryavarman I was later upgraded under the Angkor period by Uday Aditya Varman II. So it remained a Hindu temple for a very long period of time, and recently, as in the last few centuries, it was turned into a Buddhist shrine. But the deity worshipped here is also Lord Shiva. So at both temples, the primary deity is Lord Shiva, and they remain as a Hindu Buddhist temple, marking a direct linkage, cultural linkage with Indian civilization. But this temple has been a source of dispute. It was controlled by Cambodia. Cambodia had taken control of the Kwai temple. But during last year's war, Thailand took control from Cambodia. Thailand managed to capture it from Cambodia. So obviously, when Thailand held this Buddhist ritual and ceremony, it has been opposed by Cambodia. So please be aware of these disputed temples, which are linked with Indian history, Indian civilization, that are at the source of conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. So on this note, I bring the analysis to an end. I hope it was an interesting and insightful session. If you benefited, please press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.